if you look what happened in Millennium Development Goals process, it started as a very consistent technical model, but with some needs for political legitimacy, because the countries came later supporting the process. By the way, they decided to accept the model of Millennium Development Goals. What I see here is exactly the opposite in terms of how the countries from the South observing and acting inside the process. It starts as something really representative in terms of the political process, but lacks of technical consistency. Let me explain better what I'm trying to say. If you look in the Millennium Development Goals, you see small numbers of goals, 8. It's very consistent inside the model when you think about indicators. And when you compare to Sustainable Development Goals, you think about 169 targets with more than 300 indicators. And you may think, well, how feasible is this model in technical terms? And then it's important to see how the countries like Brazil are seeing this. Well, that is the price of a more democratic process, a more horizontal process, a process more inclusive. So it's the price of democracy, inclusiveness, and so on. At the same time, many countries have pointed that how feasible is this model? So to understand how countries like Brazil are observing that, they see, first, it's very important to see in a very flexible model. So it's not something, think about the indicators. We are supposed to define the indicators March next year. The point is, should we have a closed set of indicators, or is that possible to revise the indicators later? Because in some areas, it's not clear exactly how we are going to access the implementation process in the countries. So flexibility is a key point to understand how countries in the G77 are expecting to have in the end of the process, what they are expected to see. Another issue. So if we believe that a spot is already set in political terms, the basis for the process, of course the countries are very reluctant to negotiate anything before the last minute. And why? Because they fear that if they start to negotiate now, they can have to be too flexible inside the negotiation. So they say, well, they've been very obstructive. No, because they achieved what they are looking for. That's the point. And they feel this model is very comprehensive and very inclusive. So that's why they are fighting to keep what it was achieved during the open working group. So I do believe that some things can be changed still. However, it's going to happen in the last minute. I don't believe the countries are interested to open up big process of negotiation in terms of goals and targets. In the case of indicators is another important thing, because we still have some time. And now what we have on the table, which is a set of indicators with some classical indicators and the other new indicators, every country is what we have. Because in some way, the nations were focused on very much on the political process, and now it comes to the technical part, and in some way, they are behind this schedule. Another important thing that I see in this process is what really matters now. In the eve of the Addis meeting, in the eve very close to the UN Assembly in September, and also about COP in Paris in December. So what is on stake? First is about the ways of implementation. The countries are very concerned, but not just about funding, because many people have seen Addis as the perfect space to define everything about the implementation of these Sustainable Development Goals or post-2015 agenda. But what many countries are saying is, well, it's important. It will cover important aspects of the debate. However, it is something beyond. And what is beyond? So it's not just about funding. It's also about technological transfer. It's also about cooperation. It's also about to have a clear framework for interacting the countries. South-South cooperation, or as other ways of interacting different countries in order to share some solutions in terms of public policy the countries have developed. What else? Well, governance. So what's happened after? Because as you know, countries like Brazil, they are not so normative. They are flexible, they have high degree of adaptability, and they see many times that process, if it is very normative, as a way to hold the process, or controlling the process, or keeping the countries asphyxiating in some way. Maybe they have some reason to say that. Anyway, the point is, it's important to know how we are going to access the implementation process. So it's not just about the ways, but also it's about how we are going to evaluate that. And also, it's very important to understand that it's not a closed model. As I said, it's possible to revise, not just indicators. Why not to revise at some point in the future what we have defined here? What is interesting for countries that see the process like this is because they have in their backgrounds some political experience to work in very complex political environment. Can be an advantage, can be a problem. Can be an advantage when you see a model as more contemporary process, more democratic, at the same time very flexible. However, can be also a problem because if you have some instability inside the countries, instability inside the countries that are leading the process, yes, it is also a problem. So, but what's interesting in this process, the countries think about emerging powers like Brazil, Mexico, Chile, or other countries where they are so used to deal with very complex political contests. So they can feel this is, what's the problem to have 169 targets? It's okay. Yeah. I was talking to some officials Wednesday, and they here in the UK, and sometimes I see it sounds, wow, this is so strange because you say 17 goals. It's a lot. Yes, it's a lot. If you, as I said, as a technical challenge, it'll be a problem. When I talk to the statistical bureaus in other countries, they fear the process. Because how to deal with so many indicators, how to deal with undefined process of monitoring. However, when I talk to the diplomats, we are very engaged in this debate, they say, great, something like this should be wide, should be bold, should be democratic, should be crazy sometimes, but it's the price, and they are willing to pay. So, considering that those countries, exactly middle income countries, where they have at the same time this ability to navigate in so complex political environment and have a lot of technical capacity, they are in a position that is a big challenge for them. And for them, they are now facing the burden to be a leader in that process. Because the other countries are asking, okay, how we are going to implement that? They know that G77 has been very important in this process. They contributed a lot, but a lot of them have very little capacity, technical capacity for the implementation. So the point now is how we are going to help the other countries to develop that capacity. To finish, and just to avoid the dog.
4 minutes till the dog.
Yeah, this better be a generous dog, I'd say so. But so the challenge now is after this political process, as I said, that it will start with strong political legitimacy. How the technical part will be consistent with that. Because we can see as a paradox where you have countries who are not so comfortable with this so complex political contest, have some difficulties to be more flexible, have a lot of difficulties to change the institutional arrangement because they have some tradition. Think about a country that has defined social class in 100 years, and you come again to change, well, let's change the indicators. Think of countries that have Census Bureau for more than 300 years, and let's come again to say, well, let's do a different arrangements, bringing different institutions to that part. Think a country that has developed a lot of indicators about the environment, including the use of water. And now let's say, well, maybe we could revise that. I'm sure you have considered many potential countries that can fit in this model. And so they have some difficulties to, even internally, to how to deal with that. But they have a lot of technical capacity. If they decide to go ahead, they can do that quickly. So it's much more about mindset rather than the possibility to do. But mid-income countries, they can do that quickly. But the point is how they feel themselves inside the process. We can have different behaviors. You can have countries that are keen to lead, other countries that are reluctant, tending to define themselves as we should care about ourselves. We have little capacity to help the others. And sometimes that's not true. However, so we are in the point that we will start next year with a clear definition, very much similar what we have now in terms of what came from the open working groups, a set of indicators with some indicators with many problems in terms of to define the methodology and even to define the concepts. Even to define the concepts. But they will come out in March next year. And then it will come the tough part, the implementation. And the governance, the arrangements, institutional arrangements to deal with this. But to be honest to you, just to finish, I prefer very much that this process is going to be like this. Thank you.